Okay, so I'm going to talk about feedback in PBL. I'm going to start talking a little bit about feedback in general and then specifically how it applies to the PBL scenario. So we're going to talk about what are the different elements of feedback and coaching that help learners to grow, avoiding some of the pitfalls when you're trying to help students, how to overcome them. And we're going to talk about some specific strategies in the PBL setting. I'll give you one example. This was an example in my life. So I'm a gastroenterologist. One of the problems that I have in our endoscopy unit is our endoscopy list running late and running overtime. It's a constant problem. We're constantly being told about that. So one of the solutions that the managers kind of came up with is they had this little chart up on the board and they had all of the endoscopist names up. And every time you finished on time, you got a little gold star. And every time you went late, you got a little red circle. And I can tell you that we all hated that chart and it didn't help us and it was totally useless kind of feedback. We all resented it so much we made them take it down after a little while. So that's not the kind of feedback that we're really looking for. That's not very helpful. I'm going to show you a little video. Usually I do this exercise in person, but obviously I had to adjust for pandemic. Okay, Julia, so you're holding a tennis ball right now. Show us the tennis. So this is Julia, my daughter. I didn't grab a random child actor. Tennis ball. Very good. Okay, so behind you, there is a container, okay? Now with that, and sorry, I forgot to mention, during the video, I'm going to be showing different levels of feedback. And then at the end, we're going to go through the different levels. So just pay attention to the different levels and try to pick out the differences between them. I don't want you to look around back behind you, okay? So you're just going to throw the ball over your shoulder and try to get it into the container now, okay? This is attempt number 1. Okay, you're going to make another attempt now. Okay? Good try. You did. I could tell you were trying really hard there. Good. Okay, so Julie, that was pretty good. You threw it a little bit too far, and you probably want to throw it a little bit more to your right. Okay, Julie, how did that last one go for you? What do you think?
I think I could have done better.
Okay, what do you think, what information can I give you to help you get it in there?
Maybe tell me the direction, tell me how hard or soft I should throw it, or how long or short I should throw it.
Okay, so your distance was pretty good on the last one. I think you just need to throw it a little bit more to your right. It's about 30 or 40 centimeters to your right, okay? Okay, so 5 levels of feedback there. So the first one was basically no feedback at all. The second level was negative feedback. And you'll notice after the first and second, there was actually very little or no improvement at all. In fact, with negative feedback, sometimes people will actually withdraw and you get worsening performance. The third level was just positive, great job. And you can see it actually had no effect on her throws at all. You know, fourth level was, I was telling her very specific information and it helped a little bit. And then fifth level was actually a conversation. So there was a lot of back and forth there. So actually, this is one of the first times I've ever done something like this. I wanted to actually ask, so Michael Chan, do you mind telling me, like, can you give me a little bit of feedback about how that went for you?
I think I was feeling bad for her because at the beginning, she had no idea where the can was. She was just throwing it blindly. So she didn't know what expectations were. But as she got more specific, and I think the last one, it almost bounced in. So, you know, the more specific the feedback is, the better the result.
Great, thank you for that. Abigail, can you actually give Michael Chan feedback on his feedback?
I think that Michael did a good job of providing you with some specific feedback. I think he talked about how it impacted himself, but it wasn't a two-way conversation. So he didn't ask you any questions. It was just more that he was answering your question.
Okay, great. So Michael, you gave me probably level 4 feedback. So it was very specific. And Abigail, you also gave level 4 feedback because Michael didn't really say anything when you gave him your feedback as well. So it's the kind of thing you actually, that's the traditional way to give feedback, is to tell people how they did. And that's really not the optimal way to give feedback. So there's a lot of different structures for giving feedback. The important thing is to actually get good, and you have to really practice giving feedback and learning a structure for how to give feedback. This is probably one of the simplest ways that I know of to give feedback, and I find it very, very helpful. So it's called the art of feedback. So the first thing you want to ask is, ask the learner how they think it went, a very general, open kind of question, and let them talk. And then you really want to pay attention to what they're saying. And you have to acknowledge what they're saying too. So if they're in your mind, if you're thinking something that they need to improve on and they don't talk about that at all, you can't just ignore what they said and tell them what you want to tell them. You have to really respond to what they're saying. And then you do have to bring it back and focus on what you think, could be done better and what they should be changing. There's lots of different models. This is Alan Walsh's model that was developed, which also just gives you a framework for how to structure the feedback, deciding what you're going to feedback and how. Like I said, there's a million models out there. I do want to talk a little bit about the traditional idea of feedback versus coaching, because I think what we do in PBL tutoring is much more akin to coaching rather than just, people who give feedback. So, the traditional model of feedback is just information that you're giving to guide future performance, but coaching is really about the whole process. So about the relationship with the learner, how to maximize the learning by the learner, and how to lead to the most efficient and the best change in behavior. So again, traditional feedback, you think of it as information versus coaching, which is really more of a process. Feedback focuses on what did you do? Coaching really focuses on how can we do that better or differently? Feedback is more reactive. Coaching is thinking about next steps. Feedback, again, one way, that's level 4 feedback, versus coaching, two-way communication, having a conversation. You're doing feedback right when the person you're giving feedback to is doing most of the talking, in my opinion. So clinical coaches, you have to think of yourself as a role model. You want to provide a safe learning environment, so you don't want people to feel threatened. You want to really get them to think about things, so reflection, problem solving. You want to provide effective feedback. You want to support their specific goals. Most of the people that we're teaching are adult learners. They're going to come in with their own goals. You really have to acknowledge what their specific goals are. And you want to encourage self-assessment and reflection. And part of your role as a coach is going to be to document their performance using the tools that you're given. And you also want to think about your role as a clinical supervisor. So things that make feedback more effective. Number one, when the task is done poorly. So generally, most learners know when they've done something poorly and they're very eager to improve on it. When the learners show specific goal setting behavior, so they have a good idea of what they want to try to achieve in the end. They might not know how to get there, but they need to really have a good understanding of what their goal is. The message that you give them is done in an encouraging kind of way, and then all the other things. So very specific, you want to elaborate on how they get to their goals. Most people don't learn things quickly the first time. It takes repetition. You want to make sure that your message is not threatening and people very quickly shut down when they feel like they're on the spot. And you want to make the feedback as part of the whole process as you as a coach. So it's not just a one-off kind of thing. So when learners decide whose advice they're going to follow, these are the things that are usually important. Do they think that you're credible as a source of information? Do they think that your own motivation is for them to improve? Are you interested in them as a person, and how do you feel about them? People can tell when you're indifferent to them or when you actually really care. So we're going to spend a lot of time in this group talking about how does this actually work in a PBL setting, but some of the problems are group versus individual. So how do you give feedback to an individual person versus feedback to the entire group? And you'll notice that the tendency is when people are doing feedback and the learners are talking, they tend to talk about the group as this big thing. I think the group did really well today. I think the group did this very well. And sometimes they tend to ignore what was my contribution to the group process. Other problems that can happen, the tutor might not have any specific clinical experience. I know I felt that way. I'm a gastroenterologist. When we were doing MSK stuff, I really had no idea of kind of what they were talking about. I had to trust them a lot. And then, does that affect your credibility? And then the other thing that's unique about PBL is the types of evaluations we do. So I know at McMaster, we tend to write these long narrative kinds of things, and using feedback is a really important way to generate those evaluations. So in summary, feedback is all about being prepared. So understanding what the goals and objectives are, try to really have that conversation. Think about, is the learner actually speaking during this feedback session? Are they getting it? And you want to think about, how is this going to actually change behavior? What am I telling them that's going to make them do something differently the next time, and actually verbalizing that? Thanks.